Hi, I'm Mr. Miyagi and this is Mr. Miyagi's Workshop. Well, today we're going to be working on this 2023 Royal Enfield Himalayan Scram 411. We're going to be putting in a new cam. I bought this cam from Baxter's Cycle in Iowa, and good company to work with. So I've got the cam right here. So first off, we got to pull the tank. Now I'm not going to go through the process of pulling the tank, because if you've never pulled the tank before and you're leery of doing it, you don't want to do the cam change out. But anyway, I'm going to get the tank off. Pretty simple. There's a lot of videos out there on how to pull the tank. So we'll get to doing the cam here after the tank is. Okay, now that you've got the tank off, one of the things I did to make my life a little easier, I removed the coil that mounts up in this area and put the screws back into place. So that way it gives me a lot more room. Another thing is to get up here and make sure this whole area is clean, because you don't want dust or anything falling back down in there. And then route your wires up out of the way and your hoses. Get those so you've got a nice work room up in here, because we're going to end up having to pull this top off of here. One of the other things you might want to do is to remove the spark plug from the other side and cover the hole so nothing will fall down inside. Plus remove your cover here so that you can run a 19 millimeter up inside there, removing the 17 millimeter bolt so you can line up the marks so that you're on top dead center before you pull this apart. One of the other things I've done here is I've got a piece of cardboard which I kind of laid out the bolt pattern of these bolts, and so that when you pull them out you can put them in the right place. Well, looks like I missed. Nope, got it the wrong way here. So this is the front of the engine, and then it works across this way. One thing you want to do when you take these off is you want to kind of go through and just barely crack them and loosen them up. First off, we're going to do is we're going to pull the rocker cover caps off and get those out of the way. So now that you've got these rocker covers bolts removed, because down inside here we have two more bolts that we have to pull in for taking this housing on. I usually just like to slip my bolts back in the case and find some comfortable place for them to hide out. This way we're not losing the bolts. And of course on these you can tell the difference between the front and rear, the exhaust and intake, because it's marked on the inside. Now with those out of the way, what they've suggested is that you loosen off the tappet nuts here and back them out a little bit. So you're going to end up having to readjust this area anyway. Now one thing I did do is I made up a little tool using a 10 millimeter for getting in here for loosening those nuts off, and I made up a little tool here. This is just out of some brass tubing, and got it all squared up so that you can back those screws out, the adjustment screws. Back those off a little bit. Back that one off a little bit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and loosen up all these bolts. First I'm going to pull this cap off the front. And those look like they were put on with red Loctite. Now I have a spot for those. So I have a spot where I can plug these in on my card here, on my bolt card. So those are there out of my way. So now want to break these out in sequence, and it's a crisscross sequence. They don't really talk about it in the manual, but from the videos and stuff I've watched, they talk about just going around and loosening these up in a pattern. So we're going to take these 10s first and loosen those up. And we just want to break them loose. So we'll take just a crack, take these out in a wide pattern. So we're just going to go around and then loosen these off now. So I'm going to get this all set up to pull these out and then put all my bolts into my card. I'll be right back. Okay, I've got these pulled and set into places. Now, looks like these outer ones have flat washers on them. This one and this one and this one and this one. And so that's kind of why you want to keep these things in a range. And then plus, they're slightly different lengths and stuff, you can tell on this. So now that you've got your bolts out, you can pop this off. I'm also going to loosen up this plug bolt here. All right, looks like that's been put in with red Loctite. Put that right down there. I'm going to put that in the cap. Right now I'm going to get my little pry bar and very carefully nudge this up. Remember, there's some guide pins in here you've got to watch out for. You don't want those to drop into the engine. So you want to be very careful when you do this. I think what I'm going to end up doing is I may go get a soft blow and tap this a little bit. Now what I'm using here is a piece of aluminum drift, and you could use bronze or brass or whatever. And I've just found some areas that are fairly solid, and you can see it's breaking it loose here. You don't want to pry on the flat surfaces of the cam plate itself. You need to also be aware of where you're prying so that you don't break a fin or anything. Well, let's get this up off here. Okay. Looks like I need to go out the other way. And then this, that little cam seal. Looks like there's a little bit of oil built up, so I'd grab a rag here real quick like. There we go. All that looks good. The cam journals, everything looks good here. I'll know more once I pull the cam out, but I don't see any scarring or anything. So I'm going to end up having to clear all this out. Now to clean this surface up, I'm using one of these little plastic scrapers that I got off of Amazon. You don't want to use metal on here. You also want to kind of put some rags down in the hole there so that you don't get any of this silicone that you're pulling off to run through the system to plug up your oil passageways, and then you could cause more problems. So I'm just doing a really good job here, taking my time cleaning this up. So when I get this all cleaned up here, I'll come back and then we'll dismantle the cam out of here. All right, I've got this area all cleaned up. I've got the little tab loosened up on this one. What we need to do now is to rotate this over so we can get to the other bolt here. That one right there. All right, so we need to loosen up this tab. Now, my father would roll over in his grave if he saw me use a screwdriver to do this, but this is all I had handy. So now we want to loosen that off and remove that screw. So we'll take this out of there. don't drop this. If it goes down inside there, oh, what a pain. Put that in my little collection. So now we're going to rotate this over to top dead center again. And we'll rotate this around. Coming up. Now I've got to check, make sure I line up with my points inside here, my arrow. Keep this going until I get my arrow lined up. So, yeah. So you want to be careful pulling this out of there because you don't want to drop this either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a magnet. So I've got a magnet here that I can hook onto that so I won't drop it, hopefully. And then we'll remove you got to work that around the cam, so that's out of there now. So now I'm going to remove this screw and back off the pressure and then take out these 2 Allens. All right, I've got a 10mm wrench and we will back this off, unscrew it out of there, and then that springs out of there, so you want to make sure you don't lose all this. Pull that out of there. And this has the spring and everything that pushes that into place. And then we're going to remove these. So now we're going to take this out of there. We can get both of these screws out. Allen heads out of there. All right. So that's out of there. So I'm going to need to tap that just a little bit, not very much. Pull that out of there very gently. I'm not trying to mess up the gasket, so I'm going to have to go to the other side here and double check what's going on here, but I'm going to try to get this out of there without, oh, there it goes. So there's your little mechanism that ratchets. So basically all you have to do is push this lever down a little bit and push that in there. So when you put that back in, the hole in your spring and everything, it'll push this out and click to where it adjusts properly. Now we need to remove this half moon that locks the cam in place. Don't drop it. And I just use a little bit. It moves fairly easy. We can rock this off. I'm keeping up pressure on this. So you got to do a lot of up pressure on this. You don't want to drop that chain at all, because then it starts a big mess. Okay. This is the sketchy part. So I've got a sling set up here. Alrighty. So now we should be able to lift that cam out of there without dropping the sprocket and everything. Part of the problem is this wheel, this back where you attach the sprocket to, is a bit of a hassle. I've read that this is not one of the easiest things to do, so we will do our best to get this up and out of there. Now there it goes. All right, so there's the old cam, which doesn't look in too bad a shape. It looks pretty good, actually. Now this cam didn't come with these marks. I put them in place just to kind of indicate what's going on. So what I got to do is I want to make sure I'm going to wipe down the journals inside to make sure that everything is good. This is also, you see the oil in the center, that's where these roll through there, the cam lobes, to oil themselves. So let's take a look at the difference between these two cams. You can see that these have a shorter duration to where these have a longer duration, a more power. So that's what's happening here. They've taken these, and from that stock, a solid stock, to do it, they've milled out and made longer duration lobes, and these are the short duration. So that's part of the difference right there. Now one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of this lube on this. And why I'm doing that is that it just gives that initial first startup that it has a coating of oil on there. And this is a Ultimate Slick engine lube, assembly lube, and I use this quite a bit on different engines and such. And then we're going to put a little bit down on these journals. And then I'll probably put some on top of the cam before we put the cover on. But I just want to make sure that this is good and clean and good and lubricated. We'll put some more on these lobes and stuff when we get it in here. So, all right, here we go. Stick this together. I can see why they were saying that this is kind of a delicate situation here for putting this together. Tricky part is to get that loose, to get this cam chain on there. So we want to kind of get that lined up on that pin area, get that on there. I'm not sure that I got all of that. The camera died, of course, at the critical moment, but slipping this, trying to get that all lined up, and then I had everything pretty much lined up to where I was able to slip this together. And that's where you want to keep tension on this, and then try to figure out and try to set that chain on there in a central mode so that just everything slides together. So I've got my lineup marks here and the cam marks here. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this half moon keeper in without dropping it down inside, and that just rotates around very gently. Tool here, push that down on there, and then we'll clean off that lube there, because we're going to have sealant in this area right there. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to put this keeper in place, slide that down. I want to screw this in a little bit so that the cam sprocket doesn't come off. Plus, you want to get these bolts in as far as possible. I will be pulling this one back out and putting Loctite on it after I roll it through a couple of times, just to make sure that all the marks line up. So let's rotate this over to the other position. All right, there it goes. So I'm going to go get some Loctite and put on this, and then we'll pop that into place. All right, I put some Loctite on that bolt, trying to get it started here. Use the speed tool here. There we go. Now, before I put this tab and everything down, I'm going to rotate it over again, and then I'll come back, and I just want to rotate this a couple of times just to make sure that everything lines up. Okay, I got to look at my mark inside here. Oh yeah. All right, so let's get that to lock into place. All right, we're going to put this tab down. Now, I did torque this in place. I know there's going to be somebody, you didn't torque it. Well, yeah, I did. When you weren't looking, I torqued it. And I put Loctite on it. So now we're going to roll it over again, keeping an eye on that half. And yes, when I roll it over a couple times here, it did come up at the right spot. Oh my goodness. Alrighty, I need this. So I can pull that out and put Loctite on it. Put some red Loctite here. You don't need a lot. You don't want these coming out either. So that's kind of nice for the Loctite. All right. And then we will double check it. These are 8 Newton meters. Perfect. We'll tighten this up. This on. There we go. All squeezed together. So now I'm going to bring it around and line it up my mark. All right. So that's there. And those are perfect. I don't know how I did it, but I got it right the first time. I don't know how about the rest of you guys and gals, that sometimes it's not always the first time you get it right. So right now what I'm going to end up doing is going to put the chain tensioner back in. Okay, I'm just going to smear on this O-ring right here. A bit on there. Help seal it. And this goes in one way. It's offset. And with this clip up, it should just slide right down in place there. All right. Oh, let me drop that on the case. Okay. New canister of blue Loctite, and it works really well. Okay, we want to tighten up these Allens. So I'm going to set them right around 11. There's one side. There's the other side. It's hard to film and do all this stuff and get it so you can see too. All right, so let's put this mechanism back together. So this just shoves back up in there. There is a bit of tension on that. So let me crank that in. Snugged up. And then we'll grab, keep hitting the camera. I don't know why that is, but all right, here we go. Okay, that has been torqued. Okay, I've put the sealant on that they recommend, and I will show it here in a minute. But I put it on the cover. I got to work over everything, cam sprocket and stuff. That's another reason why you want to remove coil and all that stuff out of the way. It just makes it easier for assembling this. Lube up this plug here a little bit. That's another thing that I found, that these little scrapers are great little putty knives for spreading out the sealant. I'm going to slide this in place. Meter. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a crisscross pattern just to snug this down, and before we get into actual torquing this. So I'm going to put all these bolts into place. Now what I've done on these bolts and everything, I've brought them down to where, hold a finger against it and it's snug. And the way to check that you're down somewhat right is that you don't get a lot of movement out of your out of your tappets over there. And now we're going to go through and retorque them. Now I've tried to find a torque pattern for doing this, so I'm going to go what I've done in the past. So we're going to start off with probably, oh, let's see, they call for 12, I believe, on these. So we'll start off at, how about we do 5. So what it did is I went on top here and just kind of marked everything. And you can do that, just leave yourself a pattern. So we're going to start off with number 1. All right, 2, go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I got to switch over here a little bit. Crisscross over there, there, step across and do this one, and then we'll finish up with these 2 out ones. So let's say 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, there, and then the outside one. And that'll be our last time that we'll tightening these. Now we're just going to go to the major ones, major tie downs, major bolt downs. Once again, and we'll put this on 12. All right, so 2. About 3 here, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. One thing I want to do is I want to roll this thing over just to make sure that everything is working good. She's rolling over nicely. Let me get around here so I can see when the mark comes up. All right, that's top dead center. Now we can move on to adjusting the valves. I just want to go through and check stuff. One of the things I want to look for on this is the sealant oozing out. And what I've used here is what they recommend. And this is a Loctite, the SI 5900. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go around and set the valves, and that's pretty straightforward stuff. So, and then start putting the rest of the bike back together again. All right, I got the tank back on, all the hoses set up, and everything back together. And hopefully I got the wiring and everything in the right spot. So let's see if this darn thing's gonna work. Well, I have to break the cam in now. There's been a couple of ways that they said it. So you got to ride it 300 miles, or you can do it like the old drag racers did, and that's just run it up in RPM. So I think I'm going to do that. And what you do is you run it up to about, I don't know, between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM, and you let it run between 10 and 15 minutes. And that helps break that cam and everything in. But I tell you what, I can tell right off, it sounds a little more throaty, a little more power. So the only other test then is to take this thing out on the road and see how it goes. Okay, now we just let her cool down. This was the second startup and running at around $2,000 for about 10 minutes. Try to get enough circulation of air around the engine as possible. Cam should be broken in, so I can just ride it like you stole it. So some of the stuff you might need is you can make up your own bolt board out of just some cardboard. You'll need some sealant. This is what they suggest to use. This Loctite SI 59, and it works well. It's a little bit on the pricey side, but if you want something a little cheaper, you can go with something like this 3-bond or the Honda Bond. Those all work just fine. This, I'm trying it out just to see how well it works on stuff. I think it works fairly well so far. So when you're cleaning up the head or the surface areas, you know, these little scrapers, these plastic scrapers work really well. I got these off of Amazon, and maybe follow through with some acetone and a rag to clean that up. Other things you should have is some blue Loctite and some red Loctite. and something to lubricate the cam area, you could use this Ultimate Slick. If you don't have access to that, I've used this quite a bit for putting motors together. Believe it or not, this Lucas motorcycle oil stabilizer, pretty sticky, just like the Ultimate Lube, works quite well. Another thing you might want to use on there is a brass, or like this one here, aluminum drift, and of course the old tapper. And then definitely you want to have a fairly decent torque wrench. Now I got this off of Amazon. It goes down to the small Newton measurements that you need for doing this, and I think it was about $45. It came with this whole kit, and I thought that was a pretty good deal. Worked fine. I really like it. And of course, if you want, you can make up for your adjusting your valve tappets there. You could make up a little wrench. This is just a 10mm wrench, and I welded on a little piece of scrap metal. And then I found some brass tubing or bronze tubing that I had, and then I just made my own square fit here. All this is just a vacuum plug. And your standard tools. You need a 19mm to turn the crank over. You need a 17mm to take the front plug off, 10mm, and an 8mm socket, and a ratchet. Well, there you have it. The installation of the performance cam from Kent Cams. Now this cam isn't going to add more speed to your bike, but I tell you what, you won't be downshifting as much. You got a lot more torque there. The ride this morning was a short one, but it was a fun one, and I enjoyed it. Tomorrow I'm going to take it on a little longer ride. We'll see how it does on the highway. But the big test is with it loaded down with gear and everything. So if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the comment section below. Or you can send them to my email address at tmiyagi@hotmail.com. So if you've liked this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget that ringy-ding button over there for the next episode coming up. So this is Mr. Miyagi saying, you be safe out there, and hope to see you on the road, maybe a dirt one. Ciao.